Hello everybody. Today I'm going to go over my top 10 suggestions for your first week on a job site as an apprentice electrician. These will be kind of from my perspective of, I guess, what I wish somebody would have told me before starting my first week as an apprentice electrician. If you enjoy this video and if you would like to see more content like this, please like this video as well as subscribe to my channel. Thanks. First one on the list is before you start work, try to do a little bit of research beforehand. Specifically, research on tools would be beneficial, material, basic electrical materials, and perhaps the common or most common basic National Electrical Code requirements. Not necessarily how to use the code book. You're not going to be able to learn all of that before you start work necessarily, but definitely just your basic outlet spacing requirement if you're going into a residential job site. Wire size, maybe that'd be a good thing that you can look up on, is what's the ampacity for certain cables or wire that you perhaps will be working on. Biggest thing is your tools and your materials as an apprentice electrician. It's not going to so much be the code side because you will get some code knowledge from your journeyman. However, the tools and the material bit is going to be really important. There's a few different resources you can go to for that. YouTube is an excellent resource. There's different blogs. You can Google it, just top tools you need to know and their functions and their uses. For me personally, what I ended up doing is I bought a little DeWalt handbook from Barnes & Noble my summer before I started community college for an electrician program. And within that booklet, it kind of told me everything that I was explaining as far as basic code requirements, some material knowledge, and some tool knowledge. That way I'd at least be able to talk the language before starting on the job site. Number 2 suggestion I have for you is just to try to be a little open-minded. Whenever you start something new, you're going to be the fool. And that isn't necessarily restricted to being an apprentice in a trade. That applies to all of life. Let's say even when you advance in your career, let's say you're going to be a manager in whatever position you're going to be. Now all of a sudden you're managing a department. Your first week on the job as a manager, you're going to not know what you're doing. I mean, people, you hear that age-old phrase, fake it until you make it. That's definitely true. Not everybody knows the ins and outs of what they're going to do day one. And being able to stomach that and be able to reconcile with that just from an emotional or anxiety perspective is a good thing to keep in mind, is that yes, you are going to not really know what you're doing, especially your first week on the job. But you have to forgive yourself for that. You have to keep an open mind. You have to be a little bit patient with other people because they might have higher expectations out of you than what you're able to deliver on your first week. So just have a little bit of patience, have a little bit of an open mind, and forgive yourself for not knowing what's going on, because you have to start somewhere, otherwise you'll go nowhere, right? So you have to start new and green before you can advance and develop your skill set. Number 3 I have is show up a little early if you can. My first day on the job site, I was the first one there, which I kind of somewhat regret in a way. I mean, it's not a terrible regret, but you know, it's a little weird if you show up more than, I don't know, 15 minutes early somewhere. We worked on a crew one time where there was one guy that would always be there a half hour early, and we'd be kind of like, what? And he'd just sit in his truck, and it kind of rubbed people the wrong way. So try not to be like a total dork about it, but you know, it's just that old school traditional work ethic thing that is really going to surprise people. If you're like early, especially this day and age, 10 minutes early, let's say, people are going to be like, oh my gosh, look at this guy. He's showing up 10 minutes early. He's already got his tools on, ready to go. That's going to blow people away. So like I said, don't show up too early because that's a little awkward, but try not to be late and try not to be just precisely on time, especially that first week or maybe the first few weeks until people kind of learn your work ethic and your personality. People aren't going to know what to expect, so they're going to be kind of having a magnifying glass under you. They're going to judge you off of kind of what some people might consider petty things, such as when you show up to work. If you show up to work a little early, they're going to judge you on that, and that's going to look good on you. Number 4 on my list is to make an introduction. So what I mean by that is don't wait for people to come up to you and say, hi, my name's Bill, what's your name? How long have you been on this job site? Whatever. Be the one who goes up to them and be like, hi, my name's Chris. I just started. How long have you been on this job site? How long have you been in the trade? Are you from the area? Just those kind of small talk. Say your name, say, how long you've been in it and that this is your first week or whatever starting. Ask them how long they've been in the trade, how long they've been on this job site, and if they're from the area or not, or where they're originally from. Can't go wrong with just those simple small talk. The reason I say that you should make the introduction is because you're going to come off as kind of like insecure, not very confident, or awkward if you just show up on the job and expect people to talk to you all the time. Also, if you are too forward, if you're trying to like dig in and get all this information, you might also rub people the wrong way for being a little bit big-headed or something if you're going around trying to be over charismatic your first week, especially since your first week you kind of want to be a little bit more reserved and kind of listen more than you speak, sort of thing. Number 5 on the list is to have your tools ready. This is something that I hope 90% of everybody will just know to do already, but I have had apprentices on job sites before that have showed up without any tools, and they definitely look like a clown. You don't want to be the guy that's like, well, he doesn't even have tools. You don't want HR or the project manager or the business owner or whatever the size of your operation you work for showing up being like, well, how's the new guy doing? Well, he doesn't have tools. I mean, that looks very poorly on you. Wish I didn't have to put that on the list, but these days you kind of have to make sure to make a point to point that out, that you have to have your tools when you're working as an electrician apprentice. Number 6 on the list is asking good questions. So that's kind of a cliche or something that people say all the time that, what does that mean, asking a good question? I think a good way of asking a good question would be to do some investigation yourself, put together in your head what you think needs to happen or what you think a solution could be, and then bring that information to somebody who has more knowledge than you on the subject and say, hey, I got this and this, I think this needs to happen. Is that correct, or where am I going wrong? That's a good question instead of just, what do I do? When you just, without doing any background investigation, and you show up to your journeyman, let's say, and say, how do I do this? That might get them a little grumpy compared to you're saying, well, I got this cable, I have this outlet, I think I need to strip this wire this far, curl it this direction, put it under the screw, tighten it down. Is that correct, or what am I missing, or what else should I need to know? That's a better question than, how do I wire this? Number 7 on my list is not to work on anything live. And this is a really stupid thing that I did my first week on the job, where I was on a job site with a foreman. He told us all to wire everything hot. So that's the only time in my whole electrician career I ever attempted even to device, or anybody ever told me to wire devices with live electricity on them. I've never heard of anybody saying that. I've never done it since. And I didn't know what to expect because it was my first week. He was my foreman. He was my journeyman. So I thought, for some reason that there would be some kind of like a competence hierarchy with that, where he would be competent enough that this was a necessity. But what it was is there was just lights on, temporary lights on some circuits that he wanted to keep on so that way people could see. And he didn't want us to turn off that circuit for 10 minutes so we can put in some switches or some outlets or whatever during that 10-minute period. That way people could continue to have lights while they're working, which, from an electrical theory standpoint is even worse, because that means that your live circuit is under load. Devicing for maybe like 10 minutes, or do 10-15 minutes trying to land some devices hot. I was getting zapped and I got frustrated and I shut off power, and I just like, no dude, I don't care. But it was too chicken to say that right away, because I thought, well, maybe this is just what they do. It's not what they do. So if anybody's telling you to do anything live as an apprentice, say no. Especially your first week, say no. That's something that I wish somebody would have been able to tell me or instill that confidence into myself at that time, but I didn't have that kind of confidence at the time. Which leads me to number 8, which is don't be macho. Don't try to prove yourself in the realm or under the umbrella of working safe. Don't try to lift something too heavy. Don't try to work on something live to try to prove that you're macho or tough or, confident and capable of doing the job, because you don't want to get yourself hurt. In your first week on the job, you're not going to know enough to completely know what you're doing all the time. So if you're really just overexerting yourself or trying to be macho, you could get yourself in an unsafe situation. 9 is dress for the occasion. So what I mean by that is if it's winter outside, maybe have some Carhartt bibs ready just in case you have to do something outside for a little while. Make sure you have boots or other PPE you might need on the job site. Maybe you need safety glasses, maybe you need high-vis vest or a hard hat, something along those lines. Make sure you have your PPE. When I was at the tech school, we would have some contractors coming back saying that, young guys were showing up with jogger sweatpants on and like Nike tennis shoes to a job site. And then everybody was like, what? You got to have work pants on, you got to have boots. I mean, you can't just be wearing tennis shoes and joggers as you're going through a job site, especially when there's nails or metal or whatever else around. It just kind of looks poorly on yourself. So, dress for the occasion, dress like you're a tradesperson, not somebody just going out to the mall or your streetwear, I guess. Last on my list is don't say more than is necessary, which that might come off the wrong way. That's kind of like I'm saying, shut up and listen or whatever. I don't want it to sound that harsh, but when you're starting something new, I think it's best just to kind of take a step back and kind of observe. Just observe the personalities around you, see kind of how people work. Let everybody else kind of introduce themselves as far as their personalities and their opinions to you first before you go volunteering and sharing all this information about yourself. Maybe that's not your style. Maybe that's something that, you're really extroverted or you're really charismatic and you want to tell everybody your political opinions or your religious affiliations. And my suggestion to you is your first week on the job is not the time to do that. I would probably want to develop some kind of a trust with your coworkers or your crew you're on before you say too much than is necessary. Your first week, use that as an opportunity to listen and observe, collect information. All right, well, that's it. That's my top 10 suggestions for your first week on a job site as an apprentice electrician. Something to note is that these advice pieces are going to vary depending on your background. And that's something that every individual electrician has that's different from each other. Is you have different set of tools, so everybody's going to have slightly different tools. They're going to have slightly different power tools and different attachments or bits or whatever. People are going to have their own set of gear, their own tool bags, storage solutions, whatever they do. People are also going to have their own unique experience. So nobody's going to have the perfect inline experience. Some people might have X amount of years commercial, residential, service. Same thing starting into this trade. Maybe you were a framer, maybe you were a carpenter, or a plumber, or maybe you just worked at a pizza shop. Maybe you were in the military. I mean, all that experience from, maybe you had family that were an electrician. That all varies from your experience level from starting day one, as well as your education background. Have you had any education up until this point? That's also going to be a variable in how these top 10 suggestions apply to you as well. All right, thanks for watching, everyone.